We chanted the same verses you just read out of the Torah scroll yesterday. So it's kind of nice hearing it again. Because a scroll is not a book, it's not easy to flip, from place to place. Quite often for special occasions, there are special readings which may be in different places in the book. And it could take quite a while to scroll to a place, far away. And the rabbis in the Talmud said, "You shall not burden your congregations." And what they meant by that was, don't make them sit there and wait for you to scroll this thing to get to another place. They'll be all fidgety and start talking about sports or something. And so it's very common to have several Torah scrolls so that you can quickly move from one place to the other. This is why books work so much better than scrolls, but this is the way it is. And so quite often throughout the year, we have these special occasions where we use two scrolls. So we have one that we use for the reading of the week, and then we'll use the second one to quickly move to the special reading. Well, yesterday was a triple threat because on a very rare occasion, it was not only a Sabbath, and so we had our regular Sabbath reading, but it was also there's several special Sabbaths leading up to Passover. And yesterday was one of those, so there were special readings for that. It's called Shabbat HaChodesh. It's the first Sabbath of the Jewish month of Nisan, which is the month that Passover falls in. The 14th of Nisan, as we just heard in the readings, they were talking about that. But not only that, but yesterday, the new month of Nisan was yesterday. And so you have special readings for the new month as well. So we needed 3 Torah scrolls, but we're poor. We only have 2. So we only got to do 2 of the readings. And so I had to make a call there, and I said, I think Shabbat HaChodesh trumps the new month. So we just did the 2 readings, the regular and that one. So anyway. So Pastor Chris asked me to come and not talk about so much the meaning of Passover and that sort of thing, but she asked me to talk about what does Passover mean to Messianic Jews. And so I came today with 4 points to make. A couple I will make quickly, and then one I'll focus on more. First of all, Passover is a holiday that's largely celebrated in the home. There are some things done during the week of Passover at synagogue, but the vast majority of the celebration is at home. And this is mimicking that first Passover where the lambs were brought into the home after they were slaughtered and cooked and eaten. And so Passover is largely a family event. And because of that, there's a lot of warm memories associated with that and that sort of thing. And I've heard the term Christian and Easter Christians, C&E Christians. You ever heard that term before? Well, we have P and Y Jews. It's for Passover and Yom Kippur. So Jews who would never darken the doorstep of a synagogue will very commonly get together with family for Passover, at least, and many of them will at least show up to shul for Yom Kippur, because that's the other really, really big day. And so from that point of view, it's important to Messianic Jews just because of the family nature of it and the warm memories that might be associated with it and that sort of thing. Secondly, it's a mitzvah. It's a commandment. The basic tenet of Messianic Judaism is that we are still under the covenant that God made with us at Sinai. And that's not something that we're free to toss aside. And therefore, Passover is important because this is a commandment, as we read, that for all generations we are to commemorate and celebrate this time. Thirdly, is it's very important for us as Messianic Jews to observe these holidays like Passover, to show our fellow Jews that you can be a follower of Yeshua, of Jesus, and yet live as an observant Jew. I had a boss some years ago that used to tease me that I became a Messianic Jew so I could have double the holidays. But a lot of people are surprised that we don't celebrate Christmas and Easter. They think, well, if you believe in Jesus, then how come you don't do Christmas and Easter? Well, there are certain signature markers that tells a Jewish person that another Jew has left the fold and has left the Jewish people. And the biggie, the real biggie, is baptism. Because in the Middle Ages, so many Jews were forced to convert to Christianity and were forced to be baptized. Or there were many Jews who chose to convert to Christianity in order to avoid persecution or for convenience or whatever the case may be. That was a signature event that said, I am no longer a Jew, I'm now a Christian, I'm leaving the Jewish people. Right? It's viewed as like the traitor event, if you will. This is so strong in the Jewish community that there was back in I think the 1700s, a rabbi who became convinced that Jesus was the Messiah, but he refused to be baptized his whole life because he also understood that he was still part of his people, and he did not want to make that step and break away from them. It's very common, not so much these days, but in older times, that if a person did this, the family would actually set Shiva for them. This is a mourning practice as if the person had died. And this person has left us, they're no longer part of our family, they've gone to the enemy. So that's the biggie. But Christmas and Easter are also two very signature things, and a lot of people will say to me, well, I know a Jewish person that has a Christmas tree, and that sort of thing. And I say, yes, this is true, in this day and age, especially with intermarriage that happens, it's very common that you'll find Jewish people with Christmas trees in their house and that sort of a thing. Or in the early days of the 20th century, it was so American that the immigrants did it just to try to be American. They just wanted to blend in, and so this was just what you did. But it is a sign to a religious Jew that you're fading away. You're setting aside the practices of our people, and this is true of Easter as well. Messianic Jews are often accused of being Christians that are dressing up like Jews in order to lure them away from the faith. We're viewed as wolves in sheep clothing. And the sad thing is that historically that's true. Historically there were Christian missionaries who would put on yarmulkes, would put on a veneer of Judaism in order to try to lure people in. And so this caused a lot of damage for the gospel. we want to convey the message, as I said, that we are both followers of Yeshua and committed, observant Jews. As a matter of fact, most Messianic Jews become more observant of the Jewish traditions when they encounter Jesus. A lot of Messianic Jews, or a lot of Jewish people who come to faith, come from maybe a secular home or a less observant home or something like that. And when they encounter Jesus as a Jew and they begin to understand the gospel in a Jewish context, this stirs in them a desire to be more committed to the covenant that God gave us. So that's the first three. So the fourth one's the one I want to spend a little bit more time on. And I kind of forget what I've talked to you guys about and what I haven't. Have I talked before about how the Bible sees time? I don't think I have, but I'm not sure. Okay, so you guys.
We all forget anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a coworker, I'm always telling her jokes, and I'll say, "Did I tell you this one?" She says, with me, you can tell me over and over again. I won't remember. So, for Messianic Jews, Passover is an Easter celebration. And this is really the fundamental core reason why we don't do quite the same observance of Jesus' resurrection as you guys do. And the story of redemption is woven into the very fabric of Jewish life. It's woven throughout Scripture, but it's also woven throughout Jewish tradition. The focus is always on redemption. The daily prayers in the prayer book, the Siddur, has this progression. It specifically was constructed by the rabbis to have this progression that always ends in this call of looking forward to the redemption of the world. And the very last prayer that is sung in a service is called the Aleinu. And this is a prayer that all the nations of the world, that all the peoples of the world would recognize that the God of Israel is the true God, and that they would come to worship him and turn away from their evil ways. So the whole focus of Jewish prayer is, if you look at the prayers, they focus early on about the restoration of Israel. And you say, you just want to be home again and be restored. And yes, that's true. But it's being viewed as Israel is restored so that the Messiah may come and bring that final redemption to the world. It's part and parcel together of it. Does that make sense? So, biblical notion of time. When we think of time, we tend to think of a timeline, right? Kids do this in school all the time. Here's the beginning of time. Here's now. You draw a straight line and you can drop on there George Washington and, the pyramids and all that sort of thing. We think of time as linear. Ancient peoples did not conceive of time that way. They saw time as circular. There was no sense of a beginning and an end per se. It was just moving around and around again in the seasons, and you just come back to these same events over and over again. And as a matter of fact, chase a little bit of a rabbit here, but as a matter of fact, this is why we tend, especially as moderns in particular, that the future generations will know more than us, will be better than us. We tend to think of that as in that case. But in a circular view of time, it's the previous generations, it's the wisdom of the past that is the guys who really know. and it's not focused on the future as much as we are today. But the Bible doesn't see time as linear or circular. It's a combination of the two. It's a spiral. So it has a beginning and an end. There is a linear component to it. But there's also the circular component to it, in that we come back again and again to these similar themes and things like that. And let me explain that a little bit. So, for example, we have the story of the Exodus, this redemption from Egypt. That's a point on the spiral. But we come to the book of Judges, I remember right, it's in the book of Judges, where we have a similar event. Well, before we get to Judges, actually, we have the parting of the Red Sea in the story of Exodus. But then later on, we have the parting of the River Jordan as they cross into the Promised Land. This is viewed in biblical thinking as we've come back to the same point on the spiral, but we're just a little further along. We're on the next loop up. Does that make sense? Yeah. Try to do this without visual aids. You just hit my finger to do this. Right? So the Red Sea's parted. Now, a generation later, we have the parting of the Jordan River. So this theme, history's advancing, but yet we're coming back to the same theme. And then later on, the book of Judges, we have this war with the Canaanites, and Deborah and Barak are leading the Jewish people against them. And what happens? Their army is wiped out by a flash flood in a wadi in the land of Israel. A wadi is like a dry riverbed that when floods come will suddenly become a river for a short period of time. And so again, we've come to another place on that spiral where just as the Egyptians were wiped out at the Red Sea, here we have the Canaanites being wiped out by God as well. So we are progressing through time in a linear fashion, but we're getting a little dizzy doing it. We're just kind of going around and hitting that. And so when we observe Passover, we're not connecting just to that first Passover, but we're connecting to all these stories of the same spot on the spiral, if you will, the same theme over and over again. And of course, what we're really doing is not just observing down the spiral at the past, but we're looking forward at the future. We're looking forward to that great redemption at the end of time. That's another same spot on the spiral. It just happens to be at the very end of the line. And during the Passover Seder, during the ceremony that we do at Passover, this is expressed in many different ways. One of them is during the liturgy, we sing what's called the Hallel. Hallel is Psalm 113 through 117. And this is almost undoubtedly 99.999% the hymns that Jesus and his disciples were singing as they went to the Mount of Olives would be the Hallel, these passages. But in the Seder liturgy, these psalms are broken in half. And the first two are in the very beginning, and the rest of them are at the very end. But if you go through and look at the psalms, the major themes that are there is, first of all, the Exodus from Egypt, the remembrance of the Exodus from Egypt, the splitting of the Red Sea, the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. But then it moves on to revival of the dead and the difficulties coming at the end of the age, the Messianic age. So you see, we're commemorating the past on that spiral, but we're also looking forward to that as well. And Psalm 117 in particular begins with this invitation for the nations to join in praising and worshiping God for Israel's redemption. This is also expressed in the Passover Seder with the cup of Elijah. How many of you have been at a Seder before? Probably quite a few you have, right? So at the very end of the ceremony, we have this special cup, this cup for Elijah, and we go and we open the door looking to see if this year is the year when Elijah has come. And why Elijah? Because we have this prophecy that Elijah would come before the Messiah came to announce that. And of course, we know as Messianic Jews and Christians that Jesus said that was indeed Elijah came as John the Baptist announcing the coming of Jesus. And one year, a couple funny stories with that. One year, we were at somebody's house doing one, and the kid opens the door. Usually send kids to do this. He opens the door, and we go, "Do you see Elijah?" He goes, "No, but I see a turtle." And it was one of those plastic turtle sandboxes in the backyard. But the really freaky one this was at a congregational Seder. So typically the first night of Passover, you do a Seder at the home with family and friends. And then the second night, it's a congregational one. So we were at a congregational Seder over at the Sheridan. And we sent the kids to open the door. They open the door, and there's an old man standing at the door with a long white beard, white hair, and we freaked. It turned out it was a homeless guy who had come in looking for food. And so we fed him. But his name wasn't Elijah, no. But you want to talk about a shocker where it's all, okay now, what are we going to do? But again, at the very end of the Seder, we're looking forward. We're not looking backwards anymore. And then finally, one of the last things that we sing in the Seder is "Next Year in Jerusalem." Now this song doesn't just mean, hey, let's all fly to Jerusalem next year and have a Seder. It's talking about Jerusalem being restored as the spiritual capital of the world. Israel is restored, the Messiah has come, and peace is being given to all the nations. So we have on this spiral the original Exodus story. We have Deborah and Barak fighting in Canaan. We also have the story of Yeshua's death and resurrection. This is another same spot on the spiral. He's not doing this in a vacuum. His story of his sacrifice is connected to the story of Israel and Israel's redemption. It is not the ultimate redemption, because we're not going to get that till the end of time, but it's a pretty significant place in the story of redemption in that he paved the way with his death and resurrection. Israel's redemption is the redemption story for the whole world. Jesus did not just come and die in a vacuum, but he joins into the story. This is often misunderstood or overlooked. That Jesus didn't come and die in Norway. He didn't come and die in Boston. He came and died in Israel as a Jew in the midst of his people. The Last Supper was a Passover Seder, another spot on the spiral. And as a matter of fact, when I do teachings, I have this whole teaching I do on this. You're getting the abbreviated version. But what I point out to people is that communion is an abbreviated Passover Seder. You have the bread, you have the cup of wine or grape juice, and you're doing a short version of Passover. When you celebrate communion, my desire for you is to not just connect it to Yeshua's death and resurrection, but to connect it back to this whole story of redemption that God is unfolding in the world. And don't just look backwards when you take communion, look forwards, just as you do in a Passover Seder, to that great redemption at the end of time. That is a powerful way to experience communion, and to be meditating on that as you do so. A further piece of this is that the book of Revelation is a very Jewish book. It has a lot of symbolism and references that if you aren't aware of it, you're totally oblivious to it. But you'll notice in Revelation chapter 15, here describing this event at the end of time, the people sing a song. They sing the song of Moses, the song that was sung at the crossing of the Red Sea. See, it's tying these events together. And it's saying here is this vision of that final ultimate redemption. So for Messianic Jews, Passover is very important for this reason. We're not only commemorating the past, we're not only commemorating the past and our redemption from Egypt, or even Yeshua's death in his day, but also we're looking forward to that ultimate redemption. So for us, Passover is an Easter celebration. Thank you very much.